A little girl just 7 years old kneels on the floor. Her tiny hands reach for crumbs scattered by her stepmother's command. Her name is Emma, and tonight, even hunger feels like punishment. The woman standing above her, calm and cold, orders her to keep eating until the front door opens. A man stands there, a police officer, a father. He sees what no father should ever see. His breath catches, his heart breaks. The woman gasps, pretending shock. But the truth, the real, ugly truth, has already filled the room. The officer kneels, gathers his trembling daughter into his arms, and beside them, a loyal German shepherd presses close, growling softly, guarding what innocence remains. Where are you watching from tonight, my friend? Tell me in the comments below. And if stories of love, courage, and second chances speak to your heart, don't forget to subscribe and stay till the end. May your day be filled with peace, warmth, and the quiet grace of kindness, wherever you are. The wind of Aspen Ridge always carried a ghostly hum when winter settled over the valley. By late December, the town looked like it had been carved from ice. Rows of wooden cabins buried beneath white drifts, smoke curling from chimneys like tired sighs. The pines stood stoic and dark against a horizon that refused to move. Snow fell so silently, it almost seemed merciful, as if the world was trying to cover its own scars. Officer Daniel Rowan, 38, turned onto the narrow road leading to his farmhouse at the edge of town. He had the rugged stillness of a man who had seen too much, yet said too little. His shoulders were broad, but carried a quiet slump of exhaustion. The years had etched lines around his blue-gray eyes, eyes that once shone with certainty, but now flickered with something like regret. His brown hair was cut short for duty, touched with gray at the temples. Since the car accident that took his wife 3 winters ago, Daniel had learned to live between two silences, the one inside him and the one outside in the snow. Beside him in the patrol truck lay Luna, his German shepherd, 4 years old, sable-coated with the faint reddish hue of autumn fur along her neck. She was sleek, intelligent, and calm, a working dog bred for precision, but capable of surprising tenderness. Luna had been Daniel's partner since his wife's death. She'd saved him once, quite literally, dragging him out of the river after a drunk driver ran their car off the road during a pursuit. Since then, she rarely left his side. When Daniel couldn't sleep, Luna would sit by the door, silent as a sentinel. That afternoon, the storm was still whispering when Daniel pulled into the driveway. The headlights swept across the porch, revealing a child's bicycle half buried in snow and a pair of small boots lying sideways near the steps. He frowned. His daughter-in-law, or rather, his new wife's child, shouldn't have left them outside in this weather. Inside the house, warmth radiated from the fireplace, but it felt hollow, like a borrowed comfort. The air smelled faintly of lavender candles and dish soap. On the surface, it was a family home. Beneath, there was something brittle. Daniel's wife, Grace Holloway, stood near the kitchen counter, her back to him. She was 34, tall, willowy, with a kind of beauty that seemed crafted for admiration, but not warmth. Her hair, the color of old honey, fell in soft waves to her shoulders. From a distance, one might think she was delicate, almost ethereal, but up close, her eyes betrayed something else, a sharpness that could slice. Grace had once worked as a social worker before quitting for family reasons. Few in Aspen Ridge knew that she'd left her previous job after a complaint, an allegation of verbal abuse against a foster child that had quietly disappeared from the record. Daniel had met her at a police fundraiser a year earlier. She'd been charming then, soft-voiced, generous, and full of empathy for his grief. He had mistaken pity for love and silence for peace. Grace smiled easily in public, but in private, her patience thinned like melting ice. As Daniel hung his coat, Luna stiffened, her ears pricked, hackles rising slightly. She made a low sound, not quite a growl, but something close, a warning from instinct rather than defiance. Then came the sound that froze Daniel mid-step, a muffled sob, small, trembling, and raw. He turned toward the kitchen. There, by the trash bin, sat Emma Lee, 7 years old, knees drawn to her chest, a slice of bread clutched in her hand. Her hair was a tangled halo of pale brown curls falling into her eyes. She was thin in the way neglected children often are. Fragile wrists, hollow cheeks, skin too pale against the navy sweater she wore. Emma's eyes, gray like her late mother's, were red from crying. She sat on the tile floor beside the trash, trying to swallow a piece of moldy bread. "Emma?" Daniel's voice broke the air like a sudden crack of wood in the fireplace. Grace turned around, startled but quick to compose herself. Her expression softened instantly into practiced shock. "Oh, Daniel," she gasped, stepping forward. "She's been acting strange again. I just found her here eating garbage. I tried to stop her, but she wouldn't listen." Emma looked up, shaking her head, lips quivering. "No, I—" Grace cut in smoothly, her tone a mixture of worry and reproach. "You see what I mean? She doesn't even understand what she's doing. I think she needs professional help." Daniel knelt beside the child, gently brushing her hair aside. "Sweetheart, what happened?" The girl tried to speak, but fear pinned her tongue. Her small shoulders shook. Luna patted closer, lowering her head until her muzzle brushed the girl's hand. Emma's fingers curled instinctively into the thick fur, the first flicker of safety she'd felt all day. Grace sighed, crossing her arms. "I've told you, Daniel, she keeps sneaking food out of the trash, refuses to eat at the table, and sometimes talks to herself. I'm worried. Maybe she hasn't healed since her mother passed." Daniel stood slowly, the words digging into him like glass. He had always blamed himself for not being home enough, for letting grief distance him from the child he promised to protect. "Emma," he said softly, "go to your room, okay? I'll talk to Grace." The girl hesitated. Luna pressed her nose against the child's leg, as if to say, "Go." Emma rose, shuffling away, clutching the bread like a shield. When the door closed upstairs, Daniel exhaled. "She's just a kid," he muttered. "Maybe she's acting out, but that doesn't make her sick." Grace turned, her eyes flashing for an instant before softening again. "I'm only trying to help, Daniel. You work long, hours. I see her more than you do. I want this family to feel normal again." Her words had a rhythm, gentle, persuasive, almost hypnotic. Daniel nodded absently. He didn't notice how Luna had stayed behind, her gaze locked on Grace, tail stiff. Later that evening, snow thickened outside. The wind howled against the windows like something wild wanting to be let in. Emma sat curled on her bed upstairs, clutching a small teddy bear that had lost one eye. Her room was dim, except for the faint glow from a nightlight, shaped like a moon. She whispered to herself, or perhaps to someone she imagined listening, "Mom, I tried to be good today. I didn't cry when she yelled. I promise I'll be better tomorrow. Please don't let her be angry anymore." Downstairs, Daniel sat at the kitchen table, staring at his untouched coffee. Luna lay at his feet, occasionally glancing toward the stairs. Grace moved about the kitchen, her movements graceful, controlled, humming a faint tune that somehow felt wrong in the silence. Daniel's phone buzzed. It was Deputy Cole, his partner, a man in his early 40s, broad-shouldered, kind eyes, known in town for his steady calm. "Boss," Cole said over the line, "you coming to the station tomorrow? We've got that petty theft case from the general store. The old woman claims someone's been stealing bread and apples at night." Daniel frowned. "Bread and apples?" He looked at the trash bin. "All right, I'll stop by." When he hung up, Grace leaned on the counter, arms folded. "Everything okay?" "Yeah," Daniel said, rubbing his temple. "Just a theft case." Grace smiled faintly, her lips curving in a way that didn't reach her eyes. "You always take care of everyone else, Daniel. Maybe it's time you took care of what's right in front of you." Her voice dripped with sweetness, yet Luna rose suddenly and stood between them, tail low but alert. Grace's smile faltered. "What's wrong with your dog?" Daniel reached down, scratching behind Luna's ear. "She's just protective." "Too protective," Grace murmured, her gaze sliding toward the stairs. "Almost like she doesn't trust anyone new in this house." When Daniel finally went upstairs that night, he paused outside Emma's door. The faint sound of pages turning met his ear, a child's whisper reading from a notebook. "Dear Mom, I don't think Daddy can see what's happening, but Luna knows. She always watches." He opened his mouth to say something, to reassure her, but the words wouldn't come. So he simply stood there, listening to the snow beat softly against the windows, and wondered if the silence inside his home was beginning to sound too much like guilt. The morning light in Aspen Ridge came slowly, as though the sun itself hesitated to disturb the stillness of snow. A soft fog clung to the frozen rooftops, and the world outside Daniel's farmhouse looked more like a dream than a place where real people breathed. The air was sharp enough to bite through gloves. It painted frost on the windows like fragile lace. Inside, the coffee pot hissed faintly while Daniel stood by the counter, uniform half-buttoned, watching Luna pace near the door. Her ears twitched toward the staircase every few seconds, a quiet, restless sentinel's rhythm. Emma hadn't come down for breakfast. Grace had said she was tired from another sleepless night, her tone carrying the faint annoyance of a woman forced into compassion. Daniel had nodded, though a small ache pressed behind his ribs. He remembered the look in his daughter's eyes last night. Too old for her years, like she'd seen something she wasn't meant to. He poured himself a mug of coffee, then grabbed his hat from the rack. "I'll be back by noon," he said. Grace stood at the sink, her reflection split by the frost-coated window. She wore a soft blue cardigan that framed her thin shoulders, hair perfectly arranged despite the early hour. "Take care out there," she said sweetly, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. "And Daniel, try to be home early tonight. Emma behaves better when you're around." Luna's tail stiffened as if she'd caught the dissonance in Grace's voice. Daniel glanced down at his partner. "You too, girl. Keep an eye on the house." The dog gave a low, affirming chuff. At the station, the wood-burning stove crackled in the corner as Deputy Cole leaned over a cluttered desk, his broad frame hunched beneath the weak light of a flickering lamp. Cole was a man carved from steadiness, mid-40s, dark-skinned with cropped hair and a gentle humor that never quite hid the weight of his own losses. His wife had died of cancer 3 years before. He'd raised his teenage son alone. That grief had made him empathetic, patient. When Daniel entered, Cole looked up, his mouth twitching into a half-smile. "Morning, boss. You look like hell thawed out halfway." "Didn't sleep much," Daniel replied. He removed his gloves and scanned the file on Cole's desk. "Theft at Jenkins' store?" Cole nodded. "Same as before. Bread, apples, sometimes a bit of jerky. Jenkins swears it's some local kids, but I doubt it. No footprints except small ones." "Small?" Daniel frowned. "Real small," Cole said, sliding over a photo. "Could be a child." Daniel studied the print, his chest tightening. The boot marks were uneven, barely pressing into the snow. He recognized the pattern, tiny soles with star imprints. Emma's boots had those exact marks. His mind rebelled, but doubt crept in like cold through cracks. Cole noticed the flicker on his partner's face. "You okay?" "Yeah," Daniel said too quickly. "Probably some neighbor's kid. I'll check it out after lunch." The rest of the morning passed in a blur of routine. Paperwork, radio calls, a minor road accident near the ridge. But the thought of those footprints stayed like a splinter in his thoughts. By noon, he was driving back toward town, Luna in the passenger seat. She watched him, head tilted, sensing his unease. He stopped by the Ridgeway General Store, a narrow building whose wooden sign creaked in the wind. Inside, warmth and the smell of cinnamon filled the air. The owner, Mrs. Nora Jenkins, stood behind the counter sorting receipts. Nora was in her late 50s, sturdy and cheerful, with silver hair tied in a loose braid. Her hands bore the calluses of a woman who'd worked all her life, but her eyes were soft, eyes that saw everything without judgment. She had known Daniel since he was a rookie. "Morning, Sheriff," she greeted. "You hear about my missing bread bandit?" Daniel smiled faintly. "Guess so. Any new signs?" Nora leaned on the counter. "Not since last week, but I did find this by the back door." She reached under the register and pulled out a small knitted glove, pink, worn thin at the fingertips. Daniel froze. He'd seen that glove before. Emma had a pair just like it. "Where did you find it?" he asked quietly. "Next to the crates behind the store. Poor thing must have been freezing. Whoever it is, they're hungry, not greedy." Daniel stared at the glove for a long moment before placing it in his pocket. He forced a smile. "Thanks, Nora. I'll handle it." As he left, Nora called after him. "Be kind, Daniel. Sometimes people steal bread because they're starving for something else entirely. The word stayed with him long after he returned home. When he stepped through the door, the house was silent. Too silent. The fire had burned low, and Grace was nowhere to be seen. He climbed the stairs and found Emma sitting by her window, legs tucked beneath a blanket, watching the snowfall. The faint reflection of Luna appeared beside her. Luna had followed him up, tail wagging slowly. Daniel sat on the edge of the bed. "You went out last night?" Emma flinched, eyes widening. "No, He pulled out the glove and set it on her lap. "I found this?" Her small hands trembled as she held it. "It was just once," she whispered. "I was hungry. The bread here always smells funny." Something broke quietly inside him. "Emma, you don't have to do that. You can tell me if something's wrong." She nodded but didn't look at him. Tears shimmered at the corners of her eyes. Luna pressed her head into the girl's lap, and Emma leaned forward, wrapping her arms around the dog's neck. "She's my friend," Emma murmured. "She listens when no one else does." Daniel wanted to ask more, but a sound from downstairs interrupted them, the slam of a cabinet door. Grace's voice floated up, sharp and impatient. "Daniel, could you come here a minute?" In the kitchen, she stood with her hands on her hips, a broken plate at her feet. "She did it again," Grace snapped. "I told you she sneaks food and hides it. Look, under the sink." Daniel bent down and saw a small loaf of bread wrapped in napkins. His heart twisted. "She's lying to you," Grace said, her voice tightening. "You spoil her. That's why she acts like this. She needs discipline, not sympathy." Daniel straightened, his jaw tightening. "She's just a child, Grace." "She's disturbed," Grace shot back. "You refuse to see it because you pity her, but one day, your pity will destroy her." For a moment, the only sound was Luna's growl, low, guttural, protective. Grace stepped back, glaring at the dog. "Get that beast away from me." Daniel raised a hand. "Luna, down." The dog obeyed reluctantly, but didn't break her gaze from Grace. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. He sat by the window with a blanket draped over his shoulders, the snow outside reflecting a faint blue glow into the room. His thoughts circled endlessly. Emma's tears, Grace's anger, Nora's words. Starving for something else entirely. Around midnight, Luna lifted her head, ears pricked. She padded to the door and barked once, low and warning. Daniel rose, followed her downstairs. Through the frosted glass, he saw a shadow move outside. Small, quick. He opened the door to find Emma standing barefoot on the porch, clutching a small loaf of bread. "Emma!" He wrapped his coat around her trembling frame. "What are you doing out here?" She stared at him, eyes wide with terror. "She told me to stay outside till morning. Said I needed to learn not to lie." Daniel froze. "Grace did that?" The child nodded, sobbing into his chest. Behind him, Luna began to bark, sharp and furious, facing the stairs where Grace now stood, hair disheveled, a robe cinched tight around her waist. "Daniel," she hissed, "you don't understand." "Go inside," he said, his voice cold as the snow. "Now." For the first time, Grace hesitated. Luna's growl deepened, her teeth bared. Grace's lips pressed into a thin line as she turned away. Daniel lifted Emma and carried her upstairs, wrapping her in blankets while Luna settled at the foot of the bed. The girl's sobs faded slowly into hiccups. He sat beside her, watching her small chest rise and fall. The truth had only begun to surface, but it was enough to shatter the fragile illusion he'd built. Downstairs, the fire crackled weakly, and for the first time since Laura's death, Daniel prayed, not for strength, but for clarity. Outside, the storm had ceased. The night held its breath, and beneath the frost, something had begun to crack. The next morning came with a brittle kind of quiet, the kind that made even breath sound too loud. Outside, the snow lay untouched, glistening like broken glass under the pale light. The world of Aspen Ridge looked calm from afar, but Daniel felt something rotten stirring beneath its beauty. His mind replayed the night before, Emma's trembling body, Grace's cold stare, Luna's warning growl echoing in the hall. He had barely slept. When he finally rose from the armchair at dawn, the house was still except for the faint ticking of the kitchen clock. Grace moved about the kitchen as if nothing had happened. Her hair was perfectly brushed, lips painted a gentle coral. She wore a white turtleneck and a gray wool skirt, the image of composure. When she turned, her eyes met Daniel's, and she smiled sweetly. "You look tired, darling. Did Emma keep you up again?" Daniel said nothing. He poured himself coffee, his jaw set. Luna sat near the table, tail motionless, gaze fixed on Grace with the unblinking intensity of a soldier awaiting orders. Grace noticed it, her lips tightening slightly before she turned away. Emma appeared quietly at the edge of the kitchen doorway. She wore an oversized sweater that nearly swallowed her small frame, her brown hair brushed clumsily, as though she'd done it herself. She froze when Grace's eyes found her. "Well," Grace said smoothly, "good morning, sweetheart. I hope you learned something from last night." Daniel's head snapped up. "Grace," he warned, his tone sharp. Grace's smile didn't falter. "What?" "I simply meant that she should understand the importance of honesty. Don't twist my words." Emma's eyes darted between them before she murmured, "I'm sorry," and hurried toward the stairs. Luna followed a few steps behind, tail low, as though she refused to leave the girl's side. That day, Daniel left for the station earlier than usual. The case files he'd ignored now seemed a convenient refuge from the suffocating silence of his own home. But even paperwork couldn't quiet the gnawing thought in his chest. What if Grace wasn't the woman he thought she was? When he entered the precinct, Deputy Cole was already there, sipping from a thermos. "Morning," Cole greeted, eyeing him with concern. "You look like you wrestled a bear in your sleep." "Something like that," Daniel muttered. Cole raised a brow. "That bad, huh?" Daniel hesitated, then lowered his voice. "Cole, do you remember me telling you Grace used to work as a social worker?" "Yeah. I want you to check something. See if there's any record, complaints, reports, anything." Cole studied him for a moment, then nodded slowly. "You think she's hiding something?" Daniel's eyes were dark. "I think she's not who she pretends to be." Cole turned toward the old computer terminal. "I'll dig around. Might take a day or two. The county archives are a mess." Meanwhile, at home, Grace had her own plans. She stood by the living room window, phone pressed to her ear. Her voice was low, deliberate. "No, it's fine. He suspects nothing yet. But I need those papers ready by next week. Yes. The adoption certification and medical notes. Make sure the dates align. I'll handle the rest." Her tone carried that chilling calm of someone used to controlling outcomes. She ended the call when she heard small footsteps on the stairs. Emma stood there, clutching her stuffed bear, wide-eyed. "Who were you talking to?" the girl asked timidly. Grace turned, her expression morphing from irritation to mock affection. "Just a friend from town. Don't you worry your little head." Emma didn't move. "You said something about papers." The woman's eyes narrowed, her voice dipping lower. "Eavesdropping again, are we? You should really learn your place, Emma." Emma took a step back. Before she could finish, Luna trotted in from the back door, ears raised, sensing tension. Grace's lips curled. "Of course, the mutt to the rescue." She moved closer, towering over the child. "You think Daddy will believe you? After everything I've told him, he'll see what you are, unstable, just like your mother before you." Emma's breath hitched. "My mom wasn't—" "Quiet," Grace hissed, her face twisting briefly before she caught herself. "You're lucky to have a roof over your head." Luna growled softly, stepping between them. Grace glared at the dog, muttering, "I swear one day, I'll have that beast taken away." That afternoon, Daniel received a call from Cole. "You might want to sit down for this," his partner said grimly. Grace Holloway, born Grace Benton. She was suspended 5 years ago after a child under her care ended up in the hospital. Case got sealed, probably settled privately. But it's all here. Daniel's stomach clenched. "God." "There's more," Cole continued. "The kid's aunt accused Grace of manipulation and emotional abuse. She said Grace made up fake psychological reports to make the child look unstable." Daniel's voice came out rough. "Send me everything you've got." By the time he returned home, twilight had settled, painting the snow in violet hues. He opened the door to a house that felt wrong, too clean, too still. The faint scent of disinfectant hung in the air. "Grace," he called. No answer. He walked upstairs and froze at the sound of quiet sobbing. Emma sat in her room, her hands covering her ears. "She said she'll send me away," the girl whispered when she saw him. "She said she knows doctors who take children that don't listen." Daniel's chest tightened as he knelt beside her. "Emma, listen to me. No one is sending you anywhere. You're safe here." But she shook her head. "No, Daddy. She said you signed something already." His pulse spiked. What did she mean? "I don't know, but she said the papers are in the study." Daniel rose, his jaw set. He walked to his study, Luna padding silently behind him. The door creaked as he pushed it open. On the desk lay a folder, thick, crisp, labeled Medical Evaluation. Emma Lee Rowan. Inside were pages stamped with official-looking seals and signatures. They described a fabricated diagnosis. Child exhibits delusional behavior, self-harming tendencies, potential dissociation. At the bottom, a forged signature of his own. He sank into the chair, numb. Luna whined softly, resting her head on his knee. He placed a trembling hand on her fur, the familiar warmth grounding him. A sound came from the hallway. A faint click. The creak of the floorboard. He looked up just as Grace appeared at the door, leaning against the frame, a glass of red wine in hand. "You shouldn't go through my things, Daniel." He held up the folder. "What the hell is this?" She smiled faintly, taking a slow sip. "Precaution. You work long hours. Someone has to think ahead. If Emma ever hurts herself, or others, we'll need proof." "Proof?" His voice rose. "She's 7 years old." Grace's eyes hardened. "You think you know her because she looks like her mother, but you don't. She manipulates you, just like Laura did, crying, pretending to be the victim until she got what she wanted." Daniel stared at her, speechless. "You're sick?" She laughed softly. "Maybe, but I'm not the one you'll lose in court." He stepped closer, anger shaking his voice. "You're not keeping her from me." Grace's smile faltered for the first time. She set the glass down and whispered, "We'll see." That night, after she went to bed, Daniel sat in the dark, the folder still open before him. He called Cole quietly, his voice low but steady. "I need you to come by tomorrow morning. Bring the files." Luna rested beside him, her eyes gleaming in the dim light. Emma's room was quiet now, the soft, even rhythm of a child's sleep. But Daniel knew the worst had only just begun. Somewhere in the cold wind outside, the snow began to fall again, covering the world in its silent disguise, hiding things too painful to face, but never for long. The following morning dawned gray and heavy, the kind of sky that made even the pines look weary. Snow had stopped falling, but the air carried the stillness of something waiting to break. Daniel sat in the patrol car outside his house, fingers wrapped around a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. He had barely slept, haunted by the forged documents and Grace's calm, poisonous smile. Luna sat upright in the passenger seat, her amber eyes fixed on the frosted windows of the house. She hadn't taken her gaze off that front door once, as if she knew the enemy lived within those walls. Inside, Grace moved through the morning with mechanical precision. She wore a maroon cashmere robe tied neatly at her waist, every motion deliberate, controlled, like a woman determined to prove she was still the one in charge. She set the breakfast table, slicing fruit, humming a hymn too soft to sound sincere. Emma sat silently across from her, hands folded in her lap. There was no plate in front of the child, only a glass of water. Grace smiled faintly. "You'll eat when you earn it, dear. Don't look so gloomy. Your father hates a sad face." Emma lowered her head, whispering so quietly that Grace almost didn't hear. "Daddy knows." Grace's hand froze in midair. "What did you say?" The girl said nothing, eyes fixed on the table. Grace leaned closer, her voice low and sharp. "You think he'll believe you? You're a clever little liar, but not clever enough. The more you speak, the crazier you sound." She straightened, smoothing her robe. "Now, clean this table. And don't forget to polish Luna's bowl, too. Your father likes things tidy." Upstairs, hidden beneath a pile of old clothes, Emma had a secret, her diary. The little blue notebook was worn soft at the corners, its pages filled with shaky handwriting and tear stains. She wrote whenever Grace wasn't watching or when Luna guarded the door. Each page was like a whisper she could send to her mother in heaven, hoping somehow the words would reach her. That morning, she wrote, "Daddy found the papers last night. I think he knows now. But Grace said she'll make me disappear. I'm scared. Luna stays close. I think she knows everything." She closed the diary quickly as footsteps echoed down the hall. Luna stood by the door, ears pricked. When Grace's voice called from downstairs, the dog's fur bristled slightly. Later that day, while Daniel worked his shift at the precinct, Grace began cleaning the study. Or so she told herself. In truth, she was searching. Her movements were efficient, almost surgical, as she rifled through drawers and shelves. When she opened the bottom drawer, her fingers brushed against something soft, a small fabric pouch with Emma's handwriting on the tag. For Mommy. Inside were folded drawings of a woman with long brown hair and gentle eyes, holding hands with a child. Grace stared at the pictures for a long moment, her expression hardening. Then, with a faint sneer, she tossed them into the fireplace. The paper curled and blackened, the colors melting into ash. That afternoon, the doorbell rang. Grace frowned, adjusting her hair before opening it. On the porch stood Mrs. Nora Jenkins, the general store owner. Her cheeks were flushed pink from the cold, her gray braid tucked under a woolen hat. She carried a small tin in her gloved hands. "Good afternoon, Grace. I brought some cookies for Emma. She looked pale the other day when she came by." Grace's smile was polite but thin. "That's very kind, Mrs. Jenkins, but Emma's upstairs studying. She can't have sweets. Her doctor says sugar makes her anxious." Nora tilted her head slightly, her sharp eyes catching the faint tremor in Grace's voice. "Oh, I see. Well, you tell her I said hello. I'll be checking in soon." She handed over the tin anyway, and gave Luna, who had padded up behind Grace, a gentle scratch behind the ears. "Good girl," she murmured to the dog. Luna wagged her tail once, but her gaze stayed on Grace's hand gripping the doorframe. After Nora left, Grace slammed the door shut and turned toward the dog. "You again," she hissed. "Always staring, always watching." She reached for Luna's collar, but the dog stepped back, muscles taut. For a brief, dangerous second, the air between them thickened, two creatures reading each other's intent. Then Grace drew her hand away and muttered, "Just wait, Mutt. Even Daniel won't be able to protect you when I'm done." By evening, Daniel returned home to find Emma asleep on the couch. Luna curled beside her. Grace greeted him with practiced warmth, setting a cup of tea in front of him. "Rough day?" she asked, her tone smooth as honey. "Busy," he said, his eyes flicking toward his daughter. "She fell asleep early?" "She was exhausted," Grace replied quickly. "You know how she is, always pretending she's fine until she breaks down. I think it's time we made that appointment with the therapist I mentioned." Daniel looked at her carefully. "We're not doing anything until I've reviewed those papers again, and this time, with the sheriff's office verifying them." Grace's hand tightened around her cup. "You don't trust me." "I don't trust anyone who lies about a child's health," he said flatly. For a heartbeat, her expression cracked, something cold and venomous flashing behind her calm exterior. But she recovered quickly, feigning hurt. "I only ever tried to hold this family together. If you can't see that, maybe you don't deserve one." She turned and walked upstairs, the sound of her heels echoing like the tick of a clock counting down to disaster. When she was gone, Daniel rubbed his forehead, sighing. He noticed Emma's small hand peeking out from the blanket, clutching something. Carefully, he slid it free, a pencil and her diary. He hesitated but then opened it. The entries cut through him like shards of glass. "She locks me out in the snow. She says Daddy will believe her. I think Luna is my angel. I'm scared she'll take her away too." He read every page until his hands shook. Then he called out softly, "Luna." The dog lifted her head immediately, as if she had been waiting for his voice. Daniel knelt beside her. "We're going to protect her," he whispered. Luna pressed her forehead against his arm, her warm breath steady and sure. Later that night, when the house was asleep, Luna stirred. Her ears caught a faint sound from upstairs, the creak of Emma's door. She trotted up quietly, nails clicking lightly on the floor. Inside the dim room, Emma knelt by her desk, whispering to herself, I have to be ready, she said softly, opening the bottom drawer. Inside, hidden beneath her notebook, was a small recording device, a toy camera Daniel had once given her for her birthday. It was cheap and old, but could still record sound. She set it near the vent facing the hallway, whispering, "You'll see what she says now, Mommy." Luna lay beside her, head resting on her paws, eyes half closed but alert. Meanwhile, downstairs, Grace sat at the table, pouring herself another glass of wine. Her reflection in the window looked ghostly, hollow-eyed. She stared into it for a long time, whispering, "He'll believe me. He always does." But this time, she was wrong, because upstairs, a small blinking red light had just begun recording. The beginning of the end for all her lies. As the clock struck midnight, the storm outside gathered again, wind howling through the pines like something ancient and angry. Daniel sat awake in his study, unaware that truth was already being captured just one floor above. Luna's ears twitched once, and she lifted her head, staring toward the stairs, the silent guardian of both the girl and the secret she had begun to unveil. The storm had rolled in overnight, fierce and unrelenting. By morning, Aspen Ridge was buried beneath nearly 2 feet of snow, the streets transformed into pale rivers of frost. The police radio buzzed with reports of downed power lines and stranded cars, but Daniel didn't hear any of it. He sat at the kitchen table, eyes fixed on the diary spread open before him. The words scrawled in a child's trembling hand, blurred as his eyes burned. "She locks me outside when it's cold," one line read. "She says I'm bad, that Daddy will send me away." Each sentence hit him like a blow. He'd promised his late wife Laura he'd protect their daughter, and now, realizing how blind he'd been, shame coursed through him like ice water. Upstairs, Grace was still asleep, or pretending to be. The house had that tense, fragile quiet that follows an argument too big to heal overnight. Luna paced near the door, restless, ears pricked. Every few seconds she'd glance toward the staircase, nostrils flaring, reading the air. A knock broke the silence, 3 firm raps on the front door. Daniel stood, his body stiff from exhaustion. When he opened it, a gust of wind and snow swirled in, followed by Deputy Cole, bundled in his brown parka, a folder tucked under his arm. "Morning, boss," he said, stepping inside. His dark beard was frosted white, and his breath steamed in the cold air. "I've got something you'll want to see." They moved to the study, Luna trailing close. Cole spread out several documents across the desk. "I pulled Grace's old personnel files. It's worse than I thought. 3 separate reports of emotional abuse, one of them involving a 7-year-old foster child named Mia Heller, hospitalized with malnutrition and trauma symptoms. Grace called her unstable. Sound familiar? Daniel clenched his jaw. What happened to the case? Sealed, settled privately. Grace's family has money. Old money, they buried it. Cole leaned back, watching Daniel's reaction carefully. "You could take this to the sheriff, but without hard proof she's still abusing Emma. It's just history." Daniel nodded slowly. "I have something, Emma's diary, and a recording." Cole's brows lifted. "Recording?" "Emma's toy camera. She's been using it to catch Grace's words." Cole exhaled. "Smart kid. You should bring that straight to Sheriff Warren. Let the department handle it officially." Daniel hesitated. "I can't, not yet. If this leaks, Grace will twist it. She's already made fake medical reports. She'll turn it into a story about me being unstable or violent." Cole frowned. "So, what's your plan?" Daniel looked toward the staircase where Emma's room was. "I'll keep her safe first. Everything else comes after." As if on cue, the floorboards above creaked. Grace's voice floated down, honeyed but strained. "Daniel, are you home?" He closed the folder and slid it into a drawer. "In here." Grace appeared at the door moments later, still in her silk robe, hair perfectly arranged despite the early hour. She looked between the 2 men, her expression poised. "Deputy Cole, what a surprise. Should I make coffee?" "Already had some, ma'am," Cole said with polite stiffness. Grace smiled thinly. "I see. Another early work talk." She turned to Daniel, her tone suddenly gentler. "You really should learn to leave work at the station, darling. It's not healthy to bring it home." Daniel forced a calm tone. We were discussing something from an old case. She stepped closer, fingertips brushing his shoulder, a gesture meant to reclaim control. You work too hard, she murmured, then turned toward Cole. If you'll excuse us? Cole gave Daniel a look, the kind only friends who've shared trenches can read, then nodded and left. Luna followed him to the door, pausing to glance back at Grace before disappearing into the snow. Once they were alone, Grace's smile faded. You've been talking about me, haven't you? Daniel met her gaze evenly. Should I have reason not to? For a heartbeat, her eyes darkened with fury, then softened again with deliberate care. You're letting your grief poison you. Laura's death changed you, Daniel. You've forgotten what love looks like. Don't, he said quietly. Don't use her name. Grace's lips curved. It's funny, isn't it? How all your pain started the moment I came into your life. Maybe I'm just the mirror you didn't want to face. She turned, walking away. You'll see soon enough what the world thinks of your little angel. That evening, Daniel left for the sheriff's office with Cole's folder hidden under his coat. Emma stayed at home with Luna and Mrs. Nora Jenkins, who had insisted on stopping by. The older woman was dressed warmly in a knitted gray cardigan and long scarf, cheeks flushed from the walk. It's no trouble at all, she said when Daniel hesitated. Emma's a sweet girl. I'll keep her company till you get back. In the soft lamplight, Nora and Emma baked cookies together. The smell of cinnamon filled the house, masking the chill. Luna sat nearby, head resting on her paws, her amber eyes soft for once. You remind me of my granddaughter, Nora said gently, handing Emma the mixing spoon. She was your age when she lost her mom, too. Took her a long time to laugh again. Emma smiled faintly. I don't laugh much anymore. You will, Nora said, brushing a strand of hair from the girl's face. Sometimes healing begins the moment someone really sees you. When Daniel returned that night, the kitchen was warm, laughter faintly lingering in the air, something he hadn't heard in months. But the moment his boots crossed the threshold, he sensed tension hanging beneath it. Grace stood at the top of the stairs, arms crossed. Nice of you to invite guests without telling me. It's my house, he replied flatly. Her gaze shifted to Nora. And your employee's wife playing babysitter now. Charming. Nora straightened, unfazed. Emma needed kindness tonight, that's all. Grace's eyes flicked toward the child. You should know better than to interfere in family matters. Daniel's voice cut through the air. Enough. She's here because I asked her. Grace's smile tightened, but she said nothing more. When Nora left a few minutes later, Daniel escorted her to the door. Thank you, he said quietly. She squeezed his arm. Be careful, Daniel. That woman's hiding something dark. Don't let her win. Later that night, while Emma slept, Daniel sat in his study listening to the recording from the toy camera. The audio crackled, faint but clear. Grace's voice filled the room. You think Daddy will believe you? He'll think you're broken, just like your mother. There was the sound of a slap, then Emma's muffled sob. Daniel's grip tightened on the desk. The truth was no longer deniable. He saved the recording onto a USB drive and locked it in his safe. As he turned, Luna lifted her head from where she lay by the fire, eyes meeting his. We'll end this, he whispered. I promise. But in the hallway beyond the study, Grace stood in the shadows, watching through the cracked door. Her eyes burned with fury. She had seen the flash of the USB drive in his hand. She retreated silently up the stairs, whispering to herself, You want a war, Daniel? Then you'll have one. The next morning, Daniel woke to an empty bed. Grace was gone. On the pillow lay a single folded note written in her elegant handwriting. If you take her from me, you'll regret it. Outside, the storm had stopped. The air was cold but clear, a deceptive calm before the reckoning. The morning Grace disappeared, Aspen Ridge woke beneath a strange light, pale gold spilling across endless snow, quiet but uneasy, as if the sky itself held its breath. Daniel stood on the porch, the note still trembling in his hand, its words echoing like a threat carved into ice. If you take her from me, you'll regret it. He could still smell Grace's perfume lingering in the hallway, that sharp, artificial sweetness that once comforted him, but now made his stomach twist. Luna paced behind him, tail low, muzzle lifted toward the distant woods. her breath puffed out in white clouds, ears flicking restlessly. She sensed what Daniel hadn't yet said aloud. Grace was out there somewhere, and she wasn't done. Inside, Emma sat at the kitchen table, hands clasped around a mug of hot cocoa Mrs. Nora had made before leaving at dawn. The girl's hair was a mess of soft brown tangles, and her eyes carried a wariness too old for 7 years. She didn't ask about Grace, didn't need to. The silence in the house told her everything. Daniel knelt beside her, his voice low but steady. "You're safe here, sweetheart. No one's going to hurt you again." Emma nodded, though her fingers still trembled. Luna nudged her hand gently, and the girl managed a small smile. "Luna knows," she whispered. "She always knows." By mid-morning, Daniel was at the station, meeting with Sheriff Warren Hale, a man in his late 50s with a square jaw and eyes the color of riverstone. Warren had been in law enforcement for over 30 years, a veteran of small-town crises and quiet scandals. He was the kind of man who believed in paperwork and patience, not emotion, a stark contrast to Daniel's impulsive heart. "So your wife's gone missing," Warren said, leaning back in his chair, fingers steepled. "Left you a threat, took nothing else. You think she's dangerous?" Daniel met his gaze. "I think she's unpredictable. She forged medical files, manipulated court records, and nearly destroyed a child's life. That's dangerous enough." Warren sighed. "I'll issue a notice, but without clear evidence of intent, she's not a fugitive. Not yet. If she contacts you, don't engage. Let us handle it." Daniel's jaw tightened. "If she comes near Emma, I'm not waiting for paperwork." Warren gave him a long look, then nodded. "Understood." He paused before adding, "There's something else. Deputy Cole called in early this morning. He found tire tracks on the old forest road behind your property. Fresh ones. I sent a team to check." Daniel's pulse quickened. "You think she went through the woods?" "Maybe. If she's hiding, that's where she'll be." By afternoon, the wind had picked up again, whispering through the pines like a restless spirit. Daniel joined Cole at the edge of the forest near the frozen creek. Cole stood beside the tire marks, his parka dusted with snow. "Truck tracks," he said, "about half an hour before sunrise, headed toward the logging road." Daniel crouched beside the prints, tracing them with his gloved hand. "Grace drives a black Tacoma. These could be hers." "Could be," Cole said, then lowered his voice. "Or someone helping her." They followed the trail deeper into the woods, the snow crunching beneath their boots. Luna led the way, nose to the ground, tail rigid. Her gait was purposeful, every step a statement of certainty. The forest thickened, the trees closing in like walls. Then, at a clearing by an old hunting cabin, Luna stopped, her ears flattened, a low growl rumbled in her throat. The cabin was small, weathered by years of storms, its roof sagging under snow, a single window cracked open. Daniel's flashlight cut through the dim interior. Inside, dust hung in the air like smoke. On the table lay a half-empty bottle of whiskey, a torn envelope, and, chillingly, a child's pink scarf. Daniel's stomach dropped. "Emma's." Cole examined the bottle. "Recent, still warm." Luna sniffed the scarf, then barked sharply and turned toward the door, tracking something unseen. Daniel followed her into the clearing. That's when he saw it, footprints leading away from the cabin, small and staggered, as though someone had been dragged or stumbled. And next to them, a second set. Heavier, deliberate. "She's not alone," Daniel muttered. "Someone's helping her." Before they could follow the trail, the radio on Cole's shoulder crackled to life. "Sheriff Hale here. We just got a report. Local hiker found a burned vehicle near Ridge Creek. Black Tacoma. Plates match Grace Rowan." Daniel froze. "She's burning evidence?" Cole glanced at him. "Or covering something worse." They raced back to the vehicles, Luna bounding ahead. The drive to Ridge Creek was treacherous, snowdrifts swallowing the road, wind slicing through the trees. When they arrived, a plume of smoke rose from the creek bed. The Tacoma lay half submerged in icy water, its frame twisted and blackened. Daniel ran to the edge, heart hammering. Inside the cab, through the shattered glass, he saw a figure slumped over the steering wheel. Female, blonde, Grace's hair color, but shorter. He wrenched the door open, only to realize the truth. It wasn't Grace. The body was that of another woman, mid-30s, dark roots showing beneath a bad dye job, her clothes worn, her face unfamiliar. Cole stepped beside him, frowning. "Not your wife. Looks like a decoy." Daniel stared at the woman, anger and confusion colliding in his chest. Then where the hell is Grace? While the sheriff's team worked the scene, Daniel searched the ground near the creek. Amid the soot and ice, he found something small and metallic, a keychain shaped like a locket. He opened it. Inside was a tiny photograph. Grace and Emma smiling on the porch. A surge of dread hit him. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. That evening, back home, Emma waited by the window, her small face pale in the glow of the porch light. When Daniel entered, she ran to him, burying her face in his chest. "Did you find her?" she asked. "Not yet," he said softly. "But I will." As he tucked her into bed, Emma whispered, "She's coming back, isn't she?" Daniel hesitated. "She might try, but she won't win." Luna lay down beside Emma's bed, resting her head on her paws. The steady rise and fall of her breathing filled the silence. Daniel turned off the light, the darkness settling around them like a fragile promise. Later that night, unable to sleep, Daniel sat in his study reviewing the footage from the camera. At first, static, then Grace's voice, clear and venomous. "If you ever tell him, I'll make sure you disappear just like your mother." Daniel's blood ran cold. He looked at the window, snowflakes drifting past like ghosts. Luna stirred and lifted her head, ears twitching. Outside, near the tree line, a shadow moved. Slow, deliberate. Daniel reached for his flashlight and stepped onto the porch. The beam cut across the snow, but there was nothing there, only a faint trail of footprints leading toward the woods. A single pink ribbon fluttered on the fence post, twisting in the wind. Grace was still out there, watching, waiting, and the snow, silent and endless, had become her accomplice. The following days unfolded beneath a bruised sky. The snow no longer fell gently. It slashed sideways, carried by wind that howled across the ridges of Aspen Ridge like a morning song. Daniel hadn't slept more than an hour in 3 nights. His face was drawn, beard unshaven. The lines around his eyes deepened from worry and the sting of cold. The police search for Grace had turned up nothing but fragments. Footprints that vanished mid-trail, half-burned documents, and a single glove found near the logging road. It was as if the storm itself had swallowed her whole. But Daniel knew better. Grace wasn't gone. She was hunting. Inside the house, Emma stayed close to Luna, who had become her silent guardian. The German Shepherd, now 8 years old, bore a slight gray around her muzzle, but her eyes remained sharp, the kind of eyes that read danger long before humans did. Every night, Luna slept beside Emma's bed, tail occasionally twitching, ears rotating at faint sounds beyond the window. That morning, Daniel sat in his study reviewing the burnt Tacoma case file when a knock came at the door. Standing there was Maggie Pierce, a woman in her early 40s, slender auburn hair tied back in a low braid. She wore a heavy green jacket and snow boots dusted with frost. Maggie was a wildlife photographer who lived on the outskirts of town, known for her patience and solitude. Years ago, she had been a field reporter until an ambush in Iraq left her with a scar running down her left forearm and a deep mistrust of people. "Morning, Officer Rowan," she said, brushing snow from her coat. "Sorry to show up unannounced, but I think you'll want to see this." She pulled a memory card from her pocket and set it on the desk. "I left my trail cameras up by Frost Hollow last week. One of them caught movement 2 nights ago." "Human movement," Daniel frowned. "Where's Frost Hollow?" "About 4 miles north of here, near the ridge. Nobody goes there this time of year. Too steep, too cold." They loaded the footage onto Daniel's laptop. The first clip showed nothing but snow and shadow. Then, at 2:14 a.m., a flicker of motion. A figure moving between the pines, wrapped in a dark coat. The camera autofocused for a brief second, catching the glint of blonde hair beneath a hood. Grace. Daniel exhaled slowly. "That's her." Maggie nodded. "I thought so. She's carrying something. Looks like a bag or maybe a case. And she wasn't alone. Watch the right side of the frame." Daniel leaned in. A second silhouette appeared, taller, broader, walking a few paces behind Grace. His face was obscured, but the posture was unmistakable, confident, military even. "Any idea who he is?" Maggie asked. Daniel shook his head. "No, but she's not acting alone anymore." By noon, Daniel and Maggie were riding through the forest in his truck, Luna in the back seat. The snow came, down harder the deeper they went, the world narrowing into shades of white and gray. Maggie handled the map, occasionally glancing up at Daniel's hardened profile. "You know," she said, "most men would have let the department handle this." "Most men don't have a daughter who wakes up screaming her stepmother's name," he replied quietly. When they reached Frost Hollow, the forest seemed to hold its breath. The air was colder here, sharper, carrying a scent of pine and smoke. Luna leapt from the truck before the engine even stopped, nose to the ground. She trotted toward a cluster of trees and barked once, short and urgent. They found what remained of a camp, a half-collapsed tent, footprints circling it, and a few burnt pieces of paper scattered in the snow. Daniel crouched, picking one up carefully. The edges were charred, but a few words survived. "Custody hearing postponed, psychological review pending, court documents," Daniel muttered. "She's planning something legal, maybe to take Emma again." Maggie scanned the tree line. "Then why hide out here? She could have run south, disappeared." "She doesn't run," Daniel said darkly. "She calculates?" As he spoke, Luna's growl rumbled low. She stood stiff, eyes locked on something deeper in the woods, a flicker of movement, a man's shape vanishing between the trees. Daniel raised his flashlight, catching a glimpse of a dark coat before it disappeared into the storm. "Hey!" he shouted, sprinting forward. Maggie followed, camera swinging from her neck. They chased the figure through the trees, branches whipping at their faces. Then the forest opened to a ridge, the world falling away in dizzying white. The stranger stood on the edge, watching them. He was tall, muscular, wearing a black beanie and gloves. His face was angular, pale, with sharp blue eyes that seemed to see everything. When he spoke, his voice was calm, steady, almost polite. "You shouldn't be here, officer." Daniel stopped several feet away, breath heavy. "Who are you?" The man's lips curved slightly. "Just someone who believes family should be protected." He nodded toward the woods behind him. "Grace thinks the same." "You're helping her," Daniel said, voice hard. "She doesn't need help," the man replied. "She needs understanding. You took that from her." Before Daniel could respond, the man stepped backward and disappeared down the slope into the snow below. Daniel lunged forward, but Maggie grabbed his arm. "Don't! It's a 60-foot drop!" They looked over the edge, only swirling snow and emptiness, no trace. Back at the cabin site, Luna was pacing circles around the burnt papers, whining softly. Daniel knelt and rubbed her neck. "We'll find her, girl, I promise." As they prepared to leave, Maggie paused, crouching near a half-buried object in the snow. She brushed it off, a small toy, a wooden horse painted blue. "This belonged to Emma?" Daniel's throat tightened. "Her mother made it before she died." Maggie turned it in her gloved hand. "Then Grace wants you to find it. She's leaving breadcrumbs." On the drive back, the silence was heavy. Outside, the sun sank behind the peaks, casting long violet shadows over the snow. Daniel's mind raced, Grace with an accomplice, the court documents, the burned decoy. Every piece fit into something bigger. She wasn't just running, she was setting the stage for something final. When they reached town, Maggie handed Daniel a spare radio. "Call me if you go after her again. Don't do it alone." Daniel nodded. "You didn't have to help." She smiled faintly. "I spent years photographing animals that stalked their prey. You start to recognize the pattern. Patience, misdirection, silence. She's one of them. But you," she paused, her gaze softening. "You're fighting like someone who's got something left to save." That night, as wind howled through the pine trees, Daniel sat in Emma's room, watching her sleep. The blue wooden horse rested on the nightstand, faintly glowing in the lamplight. Luna lay across the doorway like a sentinel. Downstairs, a faint tapping sound came from the window. Daniel rose, gun drawn, and moved to the hall. The tapping came again, deliberate, rhythmic. He approached the glass, heart pounding. Pinned to the window by a shard of ice was a photo, a picture of Emma playing in the snow, smiling, taken from outside the house. And beneath it, in Grace's handwriting, "You can't protect her forever." Daniel stared into the darkness beyond the glass. Somewhere out there, beyond the swirling snow, Grace was still watching. The ridge had eyes, and now so did she. The wind had shifted overnight, carrying the scent of pine smoke and fear. By dawn, Aspen Ridge was wrapped in an eerie calm, a silence too heavy to be natural. Daniel stood by the frosted window, eyes fixed on the photograph still pinned there. Grace's handwriting stared back at him like a scar. You can't protect her forever. The message wasn't just a threat. It was a promise. Luna sat beside him, ears pricked, the fur along her spine bristling. She hadn't slept either, waking several times in the night to low growls that came from nowhere. The forest around their home had changed. It no longer felt like wilderness, but something watching, breathing. Emma came downstairs in her pajamas, clutching her old teddy bear. Her voice was small. "Daddy, is she coming back?" Daniel knelt, brushing a lock of hair from her face. "Not if I can stop her." He meant the words, but deep inside, he knew Grace was already closer than he wanted to believe. Later that morning, Deputy Cole arrived, his patrol truck kicking up snow along the driveway. His expression was tight, eyes shadowed from too many sleepless nights. "Sheriff's office just got a report," he said, stepping inside and shaking off his coat. 2 hikers found a campsite up near Raven Pass. Woman's tracks, child-sized footprints, and some canned food. "It's not old." Daniel stiffened. "She took someone. Or she's pretending she did," Cole said grimly. "Sheriff's sending a search team at noon, but he wants you nowhere near it. Officially, you're compromised." Daniel gave a humorless laugh. "Officially, I'm her husband. That's what makes me dangerous." Luna barked once, sharp, urgent, as if agreeing. Before Cole could reply, another knock came at the door. This time it was Father Caleb Weston, the local pastor from St. Jude's Chapel. He was a tall man in his mid-60s, with snow-white hair and kind gray eyes that carried the weight of too many funerals. His hands, though calloused, moved with the gentleness of someone who had once been a soldier and learned the cost of violence. "Daniel," Caleb said softly, stepping inside. "Nora told me about Grace. I came to pray with Emma, and to check on you." Daniel exhaled. "I appreciate it, Father, but prayer won't stop a bullet." "Maybe not," Caleb replied, setting his gloves on the table. "But it might steady the hand that holds one." Emma, seeing him, ran forward. "Father Caleb!" She hugged him tightly. The old man smiled and whispered, "You're growing brave, child. That's good. Fear is loud, but courage whispers." While Emma played with Luna in the living room, the 2 men spoke in hushed tones near the kitchen. "She's escalating," Daniel said. "She's playing with me, leaving signs, photos. She wants me to chase her." Caleb nodded slowly. "And you will, because a father's love doesn't reason, it moves." He paused, his voice deepening. "But don't let her pull you into her storm. Evil knows how to wear the face of grief." The words struck Daniel harder than expected. By afternoon, Maggie returned with her snow vehicle, carrying a thermal drone packed in a hard case. "Got this from the paper's old supply," she said, brushing frost from her cheeks. "If she's hiding near Raven Pass, this'll pick her up." Maggie's presence filled the cabin with quiet determination. She had a calm steadiness, the kind born from surviving what should have broken her. Her left hand trembled slightly as she set up the controls, a lingering nerve injury from years ago. "Don't worry," she said when Daniel noticed. "Shakes don't affect the lens, just makes me better at holding focus." As dusk fell, Daniel, Maggie, and Cole drove toward Raven Pass, Luna in the back seat, whining softly. The snow thinned as they climbed higher, the forest narrowing into skeletal trees. They parked near a ridge and launched the drone. The live feed flickered on the tablet, sweeping over canyons, frozen creeks, and then movement. A faint heat signature near an old ranger outpost. 2 figures, one tall, one small. Cole's voice was tight. "That's her." Maggie adjusted the zoom. "Wait, look closer." The smaller shape was motionless, no movement. The larger figure bent over it, dragging something into a tarp. Daniel's heart stopped. "Emma?" He broke into a sprint before anyone could stop him. "Daniel, wait!" Cole shouted, but the words vanished in the wind. Snow crunched under Daniel's boots as he raced through the trees. The world blurred into white and shadow. His breath came in sharp bursts, his flashlight cutting narrow beams through the storm. Luna was right behind him, her paws silent, eyes fixed ahead. The ranger outpost emerged, a squat, abandoned structure half buried in snow. Smoke curled weakly from its chimney. Daniel raised his gun, his heart hammering. "Grace!" he shouted. "It ends here!" No answer, only the groan of wind and a faint creak from inside. He stepped through the broken doorway, flashlight sweeping the room. There was no sign of Grace, only a cot, a lantern, and on it, a doll. Emma's doll, its porcelain face cracked, a smear of red paint across its cheek like blood. A note lay beside it. "You came too late." Daniel's breath caught, the room spun. He turned toward the sound of footsteps outside, slow, deliberate. Then, a voice, a man's voice, calm, familiar. Officer Rowan. It was the same man from the ridge, the one with the soldier's posture. He stepped into view, holding something in his gloved hand. Grace's wedding ring. "She wanted me to give you this," he said, tossing it into the snow. "Said she doesn't need it anymore." Daniel's grip tightened on his weapon. "Where is she?" The man smiled faintly, the kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Somewhere safe, somewhere you'll never find her." "You helped her fake the abduction," Daniel hissed. "I helped her escape you," the man said evenly. "You never understood her pain. You buried her alive in that perfect house." Before Daniel could respond, Luna lunged forward, snarling. The man stepped back, hand moving to his belt, not for a gun, but a knife. He raised it as Luna circled him, growling low. "Call her off!" he warned. Not a chance. The standoff hung suspended, until Cole's voice broke through the radio. "Daniel, we've got eyes on Grace. She's not at the cabin. Repeat, she's headed down the southern trail toward town." Daniel's blood froze. "Emma's at home." He turned, sprinting toward the truck. The man didn't follow, just watched, the snow swirling around him like a veil. His lips moved, forming words lost to the wind. Luna barked once before following Daniel into the storm. The drive back down the mountain was chaos. Snow whipping against the windshield, the tires skidding on the frozen road. Maggie's drone feed flickered on her lap, showing a faint heat trail moving fast along the road's edge. Grace. "She's on foot," Maggie said, gripping the console. "Heading straight for your house." Daniel floored the accelerator. "She's not taking her." At the edge of town, the lights of his cabin came into view, and there, in the glow of the porch lamp, a shadow moved. A woman's silhouette, long coat fluttering, standing by the door. Grace. Daniel slammed the brakes, leapt from the truck, and raised his weapon. "Grace, step away from the house." She turned slowly, her face pale in the lamplight. "You don't understand, Daniel," she whispered. "It's already done." The sound of sirens rose in the distance. Cole's vehicle was close, but Grace only smiled, that same chilling calm she wore the night they first fought. Then she whispered, "Check the window." Daniel spun toward the living room window, where Emma had been sleeping, and saw it wide open, curtains blowing. The chapter ended in silence, broken only by Luna's low growl and the storm's rising wind. The sirens grew louder as Daniel burst through the front door, his boots skidding on the hardwood floor. The cold wind from the open window swept through the living room, scattering papers from the table like startled birds. "Emma!" he shouted, his voice cracking in panic. Luna raced ahead of him, leaping over the sofa and bolting toward the stairs. Her claws clattered against the wood as she barked furiously, her body tense like a drawn bowstring. Daniel charged up after her. The second-floor hallway was dim, the power flickering from the storm outside. Emma's room stood open, the curtains whipped by the freezing wind. Her small bed was empty, the blankets half dragged across the floor. But in the corner of the room, a single item lay untouched, her teddy bear, sitting upright on the rug, as though placed there deliberately. Behind him, Cole's voice echoed from downstairs. "Daniel, the back door's open." Daniel turned, adrenaline surging. "She took her. Grace took Emma." Before Cole could reply, Luna's nose pressed to the floorboards, following a scent trail leading toward the backyard. She let out a low whine, then dashed down the stairs and through the open back door into the storm. Daniel followed without hesitation, his flashlight slicing through the blizzard. Outside, the world was chaos, snow whipping sideways, the night sky a whirl of gray. The faint tracks of small feet led toward the tree line. Emma's. Beside them, deeper footprints. Grace's boots. "Cole, call Warren. Tell him we're going into the woods," Daniel shouted. Cole grabbed his radio. "Copy that." Luna led the way, nose to the snow, barking occasionally to keep the trail alive. They passed the frozen pond and the wooden fence that bordered the property, then disappeared into the forest, where shadows danced like ghosts. The deeper they went, the more twisted the pines became. Their branches bent low, heavy with snow, forming archways that swallowed sound. Daniel's flashlight flickered again, and for a brief moment, he saw something ahead. A flicker of firelight. A cabin. It was small, hidden between the trees. Smoke curled faintly from the chimney. Luna growled deep in her throat. Daniel approached slowly, gun drawn. "Grace!" he called out, his breath a cloud in the cold. "Let her go." No answer, only the hiss of wind through the eaves. He stepped to the window and peered inside. Emma sat on the floor near the fireplace, her small hands tied loosely, eyes wide but calm. Grace knelt beside her, her face pale and streaked with tears. The gun in her hand trembled. Daniel pushed the door open carefully. The hinges creaked like a groan. "Grace," he said quietly, lowering his weapon slightly. "You don't want to do this." She turned toward him, eyes wild. "Don't I? You took everything from me, Daniel. My life, my name, even my sanity. You made me into this." "That's not true," he said, stepping closer. "You did that to yourself." Her voice broke. "No, I did it because I loved you. Because I wanted her to love me too." She pointed the gun toward Emma. The girl whimpered but didn't scream. Luna growled, muscles coiled, waiting for a signal. Outside, faint red and blue lights pulsed through the trees, the sheriff's team arriving. Grace noticed too. "You called them," she whispered. "You want me to die." Daniel shook his head. "I want this to end." For a moment, something flickered in her eyes, the faint shadow of the woman she once was. Then she looked at Emma again and whispered, "You never cried when I held you." Daniel's voice cracked. "Because she was afraid of you." Grace's hand tightened on the gun. "Then she'll learn to fear nothing at all." Luna lunged. The dog slammed into Grace's side just as the gun went off. The shot echoed through the cabin, deafening. Daniel dropped to his knees, reaching for Emma, pulling her close. Grace screamed, struggling with Luna, who bit down on her wrist until the weapon clattered to the floor. The two rolled across the boards in a blur of fur, snow, and fury. "Luna!" Daniel shouted. The door burst open. Cole and Sheriff Warren rushed in, guns raised. Warren barked, "Freeze!" Grace lay on the floor, the gun inches from her hand, her face streaked with blood and tears. Luna stood over her, growling but motionless now, her teeth bared. Grace's voice came out ragged. "You'll tell them I'm a monster. But you made me one." Daniel's chest rose and fell with heavy breaths. "No, Grace. Monsters are born when love turns selfish." Warren moved forward, handcuffing her gently but firmly. "Grace Rowan, you're under arrest for kidnapping and attempted homicide." As the sheriff read her rights, Grace went silent, her gaze fixed on Emma. A single tear slipped down her cheek. "She looks like Laura," she whispered. Daniel didn't answer. He just held his daughter tighter. Outside, the storm began to break. The sky cracked open, revealing a faint glimmer of dawn. The snowlight fell over the trees like a benediction. Hours later, at the hospital, Emma slept with Luna, curled at her side, one paw draped protectively across her blanket. Her small hand rested on the dog's neck, fingers twitching occasionally in dreams. The doctor said she was unharmed, frightened but whole. Daniel stood by the window, watching the sunrise paint the mountains gold. Maggie entered quietly, her camera slung over her shoulder, her face soft with relief. "You did it," she said. He shook his head. "No, we did." Maggie smiled faintly. "The storm's ending." Yeah, Daniel murmured, but it'll take time before the snow melts completely. As Maggie left, Father Caleb arrived with a small Bible in hand. His voice was low, steady. You kept your faith, Daniel. Not in God, maybe, but in love. That's enough for redemption. Daniel nodded. I just want her to have peace. Caleb looked toward Emma and Luna. She already does. You gave it back to her. Later, Daniel drove home alone. The house was quiet, the chaos gone. On the porch, the pink ribbon Grace had left still fluttered weakly in the wind. He untied it and let it fall into the snow. In the distance, Luna barked, not a warning this time, but something bright, alive. Emma ran across the yard, bundled in her coat, laughter spilling into the air like sunlight through ice. Daniel knelt and opened his arms, catching her as she threw herself into them. I love you, Daddy, she whispered. I love you more, he replied, his voice trembling. Above them, the mountains gleamed white and gold, and the air finally carried warmth instead of fear. The snow would melt, the pain would fade, and though the scars would remain, they would no longer hurt. They would remind him of how light had finally found its way back beneath the snow. In the end, this story reminds us that even in the coldest storms, God's light never fades. When the world turns cruel and hearts grow heavy, He works quietly, through love, through courage, and sometimes through the loyalty of a faithful soul like Luna. Grace's cruelty was met not by hatred, but by the strength of a father's love and a child's faith. And that, my friend, is where miracles begin, not in thunder or glory, but in the quiet act of choosing kindness when it's hardest. Maybe you too have faced moments of darkness, times when hope seemed buried under the snow. Remember this: God never leaves you there. His grace waits for the moment you look up and believe that healing is still possible. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs a reminder that love can still win. Leave a comment below. Tell us what you believe was the real miracle in Emma's story. And if you believe that God's love can heal any wound, type Amen in the comments to spread faith and hope. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories of light, redemption, and courage. May God bless you and your family today and always.